Just imagine capturing this on your Ring camera. It was 2018 and just outside of her condo in Phoenix, Arizona when Jessica Catania got an alert on her phone and saw this. According to her eventual statement, she immediately realizes she's in danger. She locks her bedroom door, she starts dialing 911, but that's when she heard it. So whoever this man was, he then pries open the living room window and pops out the screen. He's in the house. But this woman, Jessica, she's like incredibly resourceful in a stressful situation. She immediately grabbed a hammer, any weapon that she could find from her closet, and she hides in her bathroom. But while she's waiting in there, she's got the door locked, but it would only be about 3 minutes before she eventually hears police inside her condo. But the problem is, they never found the man. To this day, she has no idea who this man was or why he broke into her condo. In the investigation, police would eventually nickname him Smiles.
The Cheeto Dust Killer. February 9th, 2006. A witness watches a man in Taylorsville, Utah hold a bottle of Coke and a bag of Cheetos as he talks to 29-year-old Sonia Medja outside of her apartment. Suddenly, the man smacks Sonia hard on the head and forces both of them into the apartment. When Sonia's husband comes home, he finds the man's food outside the door. Inside the apartment, he finds Sonia stripped nude and strangled to death on the bed, and her body covered in Cheeto dust. Let's fast forward to February 9th, the same day, but a year later and only a mile away from the previous crime. An unknown man breaks into the apartment of Damiana Castillo and smothers her with a pillow. The investigators compared the two crimes and matched the DNA to the same man. Unfortunately, the judge has sealed the case, so the verdict is unknown. But what we do know is that police found the man who we call.
Have you ever wondered how accurate police sketches are? I'm going to show you a couple police sketches and then we're going to see what the people looked like when they were actually caught. And I cover all sorts of true crime and spooky stuff on this page, so make sure you follow along. Starting with this one. So this was a man who SA'd a minor, and this was the description that she gave to the police. And as you can see, this is really close. He has the big glasses that go up over his eyebrows, broad nose, really round face. Even the hairline is pretty similar. This is a woman who stole a baby from a maternity ward. And she was actually caught 10 hours after the sketch was released because she looks almost identical to it. So the witness who gave the description to the police officer for this one was actually intoxicated when he saw her. But that person basically got it identically correct. You can see her wispy bangs, super round face, the way that her hair comes down over the sides of her face. Even her eyebrow shape is perfect. These sketches were all done by a woman named Lois Gibson, who holds the Guinness World Record for most successful police sketch artist. She helped solve over 1,000 crimes in her 30-year career.
Man brutally murdered 60 people during a 14-year-long killing spree that would terrify the Russian people. Alexander Pichushkin was born on April 9th, 1974, and was mainly raised by his grandfather, who introduced him to chess at an early age. He was a natural and quickly began beating much more experienced older men. In his teenage years, his life took a turn for the worse with the death of his grandfather. To cope with his grief, Pichushkin turned to alcohol and quickly developed an addiction. Around this time, he also began recording himself threatening children, which he would watch back repeatedly to reaffirm his power. On July 27, 1992, his murders began when he struck his friend with a hammer and pushed him into a well. Over the next 14 years, Pichushkin would carry out a series of disturbing attacks, mainly on the elderly or homeless. On June 16, 2006, Pichushkin was arrested following the murder of one of his co-workers. When the police searched his house, they found a chessboard with names and dates written on 60 of the 64 squares, one for each of his victims. He was sentenced to life imprisonment, with the first 15 years to be spent in solitary confinement. When asked about his murders, he replied, "Life without murder for me is like life without food for you." And that's how.
Okay, all jokes aside, Appalachia really does have the scariest shit. Like, did you know there's a plot of land in Appalachia that is so haunted? They have a plaque commemorating getting rid of the demon. And I only know about it because I did so much research for this week's episode, but I literally can't sleep now. So this ill-proportioned man is Adam Livingston. In the 1700s, he was tormented by a poltergeist in his home after he buried a stranger in an unmarked grave on his property. I mean, what did you think was going to happen? Legend has it that one night in West Virginia, a traveling stranger came to Adam's place and told him that he was dying. He asked for a priest to be fetched for his last rites, but Adam wouldn't go get one. AKA, his wife was like, "Please don't leave me alone with this man." So the stranger died, but Adam didn't even know his name, so he just buried him in an unmarked grave in the back of his yard and got back to work. And that's when it just went full conjuring in his home. He came outside to see that his chickens had randomly been beheaded. Adam said at night it sounded like there was a horse upstairs, like that's how loud the stomping was. But one night, Adam has a dream, and in the dream, he thinks he sees the man that can help him. And the haunting stopped after he went and got this man, who ended up being a Catholic priest like the stranger wanted. They blessed the grave, and if you visit, you can see where they marked his burial site. For more Appalachian horror, check out this week's episode.
But that changed on July 14th, 1974. Bundy went to Lake Sammamish State Park looking for his next victim.
A number of people that day at Lake Sammamish were taking photos and shooting film. Little did they know the police would want to review this footage.
Ted was able to meld into the crowd. He was able to convince Denise Naslin and Janice Ott to help him with the ruse that he had a sailboat, that he had his arm in a fake sling.
If anybody has seen The Silence of the Lambs, where the killer had that, trying to get that couch into the van and he's got a cast on, that all came from Ted Bundy.
Can I help you with that?
Would you?
Sure.
He kidnapped and killed the two young women.
Those abductions were very brazen, and in front of literally thousands of witnesses.
Police asked the public to send in any video or photos taken that day.
People saw him, and he identified himself as Ted.
Police knew the suspect drove a Volkswagen.
Your co-workers brought over the sketch to show to you? Was it because they thought the sketch looked like Ted?
Yes. There was something about it that just grabbed my attention.
On February 19th of 2013, guests of the Cecil Hotel in downtown Los Angeles were complaining of poor-tasting tap water that was running brown. But when the hotel staff went to the roof to check the water tanks, what they found was horrific. Floating inside the tank were the 2-week-old remains of 21-year-old Elisa Lam. But here's why her death became kind of infamously mysterious. Elisa had been missing for weeks prior, which correlated with this strange and unusual video footage from the hotel elevator, which is believed to be her last known sighting. While inside the elevator, she's seen hiding, then pressing all of the buttons, and then she appears to be speaking to someone who's not there. But even more mysterious is how she even got on the roof in the first place. The roof access point is actually set with an alarm that only hotel staff can get past and disarm using a key card. Her autopsy showed nothing in her system aside from prescription medications, and what's strange is that when search canines were on the roof just days prior looking for her, they had never picked up her scent. The body was also found completely undressed in the water, and her cell phone has never been found. There has never been any evidence of foul play or that she was SA'd, and her death was eventually ruled as accidental due to a psychotic break, but the odd nature of how all of this unfolded has left a lot of unanswered questions for this case.
Downright creepy things that have happened in bathrooms. This is the Durham case, and it is absolutely horrifying. Late one night back in 1972, there was this hellacious snowstorm that absolutely pummeled the town of Boone, North Carolina, and during that snowstorm, a man receives this frantic phone call from his mother-in-law talking about how 3 men have broken into their home and are currently beating up her son and husband in another room. Well, within about 20 minutes, the son-in-law shows up only to discover the home is in complete and utter disarray. I mean, it has been completely ransacked. The furniture is all over the place, and the phones have now been ripped out of the wall. Well, it was at this point he notices the sound of running water, and as he traces that sound, he discovers it's coming from one of the bathrooms within the home, and as he opens that bathroom door, he discovers a devastating scene straight out of a horror movie. The mother and father, along with their son, are found deceased, slumped over the edge of the bathtub. Their hands have been tied behind their backs, and their heads are completely submerged in the water. Now, the reason this is known as the Durham case is because this is the last name of that family. Well, this atrocity would go unsolved all the way up until 2019, when a guy comes forward talking about how his father had just confessed to this crime. This man's name was Billy Wayne, and he was one of 4 individuals responsible for this crime. In addition, he is thought to be the only one of the 4 perpetrators still alive to this day. He will be spending the rest of his life behind bars.
Creepy videos found on the internet.
Right there this time. Hello? Hey, no. No, stay there. Hey. Oh my God. Dude. It's okay. It's okay. Leave. Stop. You gotta go. Shh. Calm down. What are you? Stop. Charlie, come on. don't even know how to explain what I've seen. Holy hell. Yes? Hello? What is that? Who are you? I'm not gonna hurt you. Leave my lights alone.
I was placed in a microwave and subjected to intense heat by my own mother. My name is Paris Talley. The day God changed my fate is one I will never forget, even though it was only my 28th day of life. I remember the argument between my mother and her boyfriend, Carol. They were shouting at each other, and I could feel the anger in the room. Suddenly, my mother's hands were on me, gripping me tightly. I felt fear for the first time in my short life. Then the next thing I knew, I'm in the dark, cramped space. It was hot and I couldn't breathe properly. I could feel my little body burning up and I cried out for my mother, but she didn't come. The heat was unbearable. It felt like an eternity before the microwave finally stopped. I was gay and confused, but I knew something was terribly wrong. My body was on fire and I couldn't move. When my mother finally took me out of the microwave, I was so relieved, but it was short-lived and she put me on a cable and me there. Hello. I didn't understand what was happening, but I knew that I was in pain. I could feel my tiny body and down. The next day, I woke up to find myself cold and stiff. I had burned marks all over my body. And I knew that I was no longer alive. My life had been cut short by the very person who was supposed to love and protect me. Looking back, I can't help but wonder what my life could have been like if my mother hadn't been consumed by anger and violence. I could have grown up to be any I wanted to be. But instead, my life was cut short before it even had a chance to begin.
Death is horrifying. My name is Gene Apron, and I was found dead in the trunk of my car on December 6, 2012, at the age of 48. This is my story. At the time of the incident, I lived in the small Provençal village of La Roque-Brassin with my wife, Nadine, who worked as a nurse's aide. We had been married for 17 years and had a 16-year-old son. We also had a baby boy who unfortunately passed away at the age of 2.5 months. I worked in a vineyard that Nadine had inherited from her father, and I was considered a local figure in the village. I worked very hard every day to maintain the farm and build my shed, among other things. December 6, 2012, was my last day on Earth. I was found dead in the trunk of my car, amidst my vineyards. In a panic, my wife alerted the police, who confirmed my death upon arrival. Initially, everyone believed that my death was due to a heart attack resulting from extreme fatigue. However, the police were intrigued by the fact that I was found wearing clean socks, even though I had been working in the vineyard. They quickly suspected foul play, and the villagers began speculating about a possible crime motivated by jealousy. The situation took a turn shortly after my funeral and before New Year's Eve when my son went to the police to confess to my murder. He claimed to have committed the murder with the request and assistance of his mother, my wife Nadine. They had, in fact, administered sedatives to me, something that had already been done a few weeks before my death, and then suffocated me with a pillow and strangled me with a belt. My son also revealed to the police that Nadine had convinced him to kill me, admitting that I was not his biological father, a fact I had accepted at the beginning of our relationship as my wife was already pregnant. Nadine, after also confessing to the murder, despite initially hesitating, accused me of domestic violence towards her and the death of our 2.5-month-old son. However, all of this is false, given that I was not present at the time of his death. In fact, he died from sudden infant death syndrome, according to the expert evaluations. Regarding my murder, Nadine shifted the blame onto her son, claiming he was the mastermind behind the assassination. In reality, my wife wanted to enjoy her freedom and had been involved with several men since my death. She also did not want to divorce because she would have lost half of the vineyard, as a legal procedure was already underway. Nadine and her son's trial took place in 2015. Her son revealed that his mother had convinced him to kill me, making him believe that I had killed his younger brother and that I had been abusive towards her. Due to his age and the manipulation exerted by his mother, Nadine's son was sentenced to 5 years in prison, including 1 year in confinement. However, having already served his provisional sentence, he was released. Nadine, on the other hand, was sentenced to 25 years of imprisonment.
This is the real-life story of the possession and exorcism of Annalise Michel. This is one of the few cases of demonic possession that has ever reached a legal court. Annalise Michel was a well-behaved girl who grew up in a strict Catholic family in Bavaria, Germany. In 1968, at the age of 16, she suffered a severe epileptic seizure. Over the next few years, she'd be diagnosed with temporal lobe epilepsy and depression, and she was prescribed medication for this. By 1973, she had also started hallucinating, particularly while praying, and these voices would tell her that she was damned to hell. Annalise became increasingly aggressive. She would growl, speak in languages her parents said that she didn't know, and on one occasion she even threw her sister across the room. According to her mom, she walked into a room to find Annalise staring at a cross with black eyes. Annalise was also seen eating bugs, and on one occasion she peed on the floor and then tried to lick it up. Her mother decided that this wasn't a mental health issue and that her daughter was possessed. Her neurologist also suggested that she needed to be taken to a priest, but then later denied saying this. Her mother took her to several priests who all said that Annalise needed a medical doctor until she finally found one that gave her permission to do an exorcism. 3 days after her 22nd birthday, Annalise would receive the first of what would come to be 67 exorcisms. These exorcisms were recorded, and here is a clip of one.
Sie müssen wieder auf der Kanzel predigen, dass mich gibt. Und das Volk nicht entführen. Ja! Das muss im Volk bewusst gemacht werden.
Annalise had also stopped eating during this time because she felt that starving herself would weaken the demons. She died in her sleep on July 1st, 1976 at the weight of just 66 pounds. After examining her body, doctors determined that she had passed away due to malnutrition and dehydration. She'd also been suffering from pneumonia, and her kneecaps were broken because she had been kneeling and praying so much. Her death had been investigated as a criminal matter, and they found that as soon as a week before her death, if she had been taken to a hospital, she could have survived. Her parents, along with the 2 priests who performed these exorcisms, were charged with negligent homicide, but they argued that Annalise had consented to these. They said that she could have said no at any time, but honestly, could she? Also, she was clearly mentally compromised, and they should have made the right decision for her. They also argued that the day before Annalise passed, the demon was exorcised, and that's why her autopsy came back normal. For what they did to Annalise, all 4 defendants were found guilty and sentenced to 3 years probation. The details of this case are so scary that it inspired the popular movie The Exorcism of Emily Rose. But who's the real monster here, the devil or an abusive and delusional parent?
Imagine being buried under a kitchen floor. This is the horrific true crime of Andrew Innes, requested by a follower. Back in 2020, Benny Lynn Burke, the 25-year-old Filipino mother, was sat at home, like many of us, during the lockdown in the UK. Her home was far from where she was raised. It was in Bristol in England. After heading to the UK a couple of years earlier from the Philippines back in 2019, Benny Lynn Burke was expecting a happy and new adventure with her husband Lexington. They met in her homeland, fell in love, gotten married before making the big decision to leave her homeland and return to the UK with Lexington, a decision that would later leave her viciously mutilated. Her and her husband would have a beautiful little girl together, which they would name Jellica. Unfortunately, family life wasn't meant to be for the three of them, as it's claimed that Lexington became more aggressive since returning back to the UK, a different character to the one Benny Lynn had met. The couple would decide to end their relationship mutually. Benny Lynn was now stuck in a foreign land to her, in Bristol, during a pandemic. The only little light she had was the little Jellica. She decided to try and meet someone new and joined a dating site called Filipinian Cupid. Initially looking to perhaps find another Filipinian to date, but instead she found a much older Scottish man named Andrew Innes. Andrew had smarts for sure. He had been at Aberdeen University. He was a computer gaming engineer. At 52 years old, however, he was over double Benny Lynn's age and had some baggage too. Allegedly had previously been married to a Japanese woman over in Japan where he had children with her too, before breaking up and then being deported back to the UK. A similar story to Benny Lynn's in a sense. At first, Benny Lynn was a bit put off by this, but over time she started to think on it. Probably with the loneliness in her life as well, she decided to give love another chance. Big mistake. They'd strike up a relationship online at first, and apparently Andrew had even offered a £1,000 a month job to Benny Lynn. She didn't want to leave Bristol where she had settled, but Andrew wanted her and Jellica in Dundee, Scotland with him. A whopping 440 miles separated the pair. 18th of February 2021, the couple would decide to meet and Benny Lynn would get a chance to see the sights of Dundee. Little 2-year-old Jellica would come along too. A couple of weeks later, there had been no sign of Benny Lynn Burke and her daughter Jellica. Benny Lynn's sister had tried to contact her and at first was greeted with text message replies, but then started to get responses from Andrew instead. It said that she demanded a video with Benny Lynn and instead all she received was an old one. Andrew Innes had palmed this off. He claimed that she had gone off with another man near Glasgow and he hadn't seen her since. Lexington, Benny Lynn's ex, had also tried to contact her for his custody visit of Jellica with 2 text messages and a missed call. There's talks that Andrew had claimed that Lexington was trying to take Jellica from Benny Lynn, so Benny Lynn had shut off her phone and fled. So this couldn't happen. It was all sounding very suspicious and Shella, the sister, was extremely and rightfully worried. The police were soon in action. They had a missing 25-year-old and 2-year-old. At first they tried to gain access to Andrew's residence but he refused. March the 5th, 2 weeks after Benny Lynn and Jellica had gone with Andrew, they managed to track Andrew Innes' vehicle doing that long distance to and from Bristol. That same vehicle was sat on his Troon Avenue driveway. With this evidence now pointing directly at Andrew, they decided to proceed and question him. Notably, there was a 7-year-old young girl sat on the sofa in the living room watching cartoons. Andrew Innes stated that this was his daughter. Under intense interrogation, Andrew Innes told detectives that same story, that Benny Lynn had gone off to be with another man. Mounting pressure onto Innes, the police would keep poking holes into the 52-year-old story. During this time, he had claimed that they had broken off the relationship when he had looked at her phone and seen that she was seeing other men, before he would admit to killing Benny Lynn Burke and say, "She's under the kitchen floor." The police would unfortunately find out that the 7-year-old girl in his house was in fact not his daughter, but in fact would be another victim of this depraved murderer. With her testimony, this is what happened.
It's February 2017, and a man named David Krupa hands a detective a tablet. Inside is a memory card that he thinks contains the evidence that will help them catch his stalker and allow his life to finally go back to normal. Together they sift through thousands of deleted images, but there's one photo that is not like the others. And at first, the detective isn't quite sure what he's looking at. Reddish tones, skin? But then they see a familiar tattoo. And it's this detail that begins to unravel the 5-year mystery of a deranged stalker. Rewind to spring 2012. Dave Krupa is 37 years old and has just moved to Omaha, Nebraska and is looking for a fresh start. He's recently ended a 12-year relationship with his ex-girlfriend Amy, who gave him an ultimatum basically saying, "You need to marry me or I'm out." Dave soon joins the dating site Plenty of Fish to see if he can find someone who just wants to have a good time and isn't looking for something serious. That's where he meets Shanna Liz Golyer, who simply goes by Liz. At first, things are great. The two regularly go on dates, which are pretty casual, but when things start to become more intimate, Liz wants something serious. Dave, on the other hand, isn't quite ready to get into a relationship yet, so he tells her that he wants to see other people. In October of 2017, Dave is working at his auto shop when a woman walks in that catches his eye. Her name is Carrie Farver, and she comes into the shop because her SUV is acting up again. A few days pass by, and while scrolling on the dating site Plenty of Fish, Dave comes across Carrie's profile, so he reaches out and sets up a date. However, just 2 weeks after seeing each other, he starts falling for this girl, and thinks to himself, maybe I am ready for another serious relationship. On November 13th, 2012, Dave kisses Carrie goodbye, saying that he'll see her later after she gets back from work. A few hours pass by, and that's when Dave gets a text. Carrie messages him suggesting that the two should move in together, but Dave disagrees. And when he replies no, she texts him back in all caps, "Fine. I don't ever want to see you again." And soon, Liz starts receiving messages too, demanding that she stay away from Dave or something bad was gonna happen. One night, she pulls into her garage and sees another message. Not on her phone, but spray painted on her wall reading, "From Dave." Liz's house is torched and burned to the ground. Dave is sent a picture of a body tied up in the trunk of a car, and the two both receive a fake obituary of Liz's death. Meanwhile, this consistent harassment is actually bringing Dave and Liz closer, and they bond over the horrors that this woman is putting them through. One night, while Dave is driving home in January of 2013, he spots a familiar vehicle in the parking lot of his apartment. Upon closer inspection, he realizes that it's Carrie's SUV, so he calls the police, who find little to no evidence surrounding her disappearance. However, they do manage to scrape a fingerprint off a mint container in her car, and this DNA will become crucial later in the story. This pattern of psychological and sometimes physical torment goes on for years until Dave finally decides that he's had enough. He changes his phone number, purchases a gun, and moves to Council Bluffs, Iowa, where he's forced to end his relationship with Liz. Almost immediately after the move, the gun goes missing. After Dave gets settled into his new home, the local sheriff's department takes a special interest in his case. They request that both Dave and Liz hand over their phones so they can trace Carrie's digital footprint, but when they download the data, they make a shocking revelation. After sifting through images, videos, passwords, and previous locations, they discover that it isn't Carrie who's sending these messages, it's none other than Shanna Liz Golyer. On Liz's phone, they discover that she has 20 separate email accounts, all being used to impersonate Carrie. As detectives continue building their case, gathering evidence against Liz, she actually shows up at the sheriff's department to file a complaint. She proceeds to claim that Amy Flora, Dave's ex-wife, is a total stalker. Cleverly, one of the officers says, if only Amy would implicate herself, meaning reveal herself to be the perpetrator, and thus setting in Liz's head a psychological trap. Now, as intelligent and conniving as she appears to be, the next day Liz dials 911 and tells them that Amy Flora has just shot her in the leg. And when investigators ask for more proof, Liz forwards them several emails from Amy confessing to both shooting her and impersonating Dave's ex-girlfriend Carrie. Liz thinks this plan is foolproof. It is the perfect cover-up. But the IP address attached to the emails, along with the countless other messages, all trace back to Liz. Further, police are able to match the fingerprint from the mint container in Carrie's car to Liz's DNA. And to top it all off, the bullet that was shot into Liz's leg is from the barrel of Dave's missing gun. In December 2016, Liz's case is taken to trial where she faces being charged with first-degree murder and arson. Prosecutors say that this is a case of obsession. During the trial, Dave hands over a tablet containing a memory card. On it, a grainy picture of a foot with a tattoo. It's identified that the foot had been decomposing for several days when the photo was taken, and the tattoo was a Chinese symbol identical to Carrie's, finally proving that she was dead. On May 24, 2017, Shanna Liz Golyer is found guilty of first-degree murder and arson and is sentenced to life in prison. She's currently serving out her sentence where she continues to behave in evil, manipulative ways, not revealing where Carrie's body is and denying her family of closure.